You're listening to the Racer to Racer podcast presented by Race 92. Race 92 is a vintage-inspired racing apparel brand specializing in celebrating vintage race culture and adapting to motorsports today. Check out race92.com for all your racing merchandise needs. I'm your co-host, Aaron Mack. The other co-host you may have seen walking out of great clubs with a big old smile on his face. You probably see him at a dirt track. He is the one and only Scott Bowie.
Hello, Aaron.
Hello, Scott. Like I said, you may have seen you at a dirt track, but most recently, might have seen you at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
May have seen me at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You and I actually were seen in public in a rare occurrence, seen in public together.
Yeah,
So
I think we had to be so many. It's kind of like when the president and vice president are together, you're supposed to be within 100 feet of each other or something.
right,
So we may have broke that protocol.
yeah, we did. Yeah, we're gonna have to work on that. We're gonna have to probably get some Secret Service and type
Chin, hey,
security in
Chin,
that.
our buddy
Yeah, we're
Chin.
gonna have to get Chin involved. No, it was great seeing you. I had a great time this weekend. We watched a little IndyCar. We watched a lot of USF 2000, and our oftentimes guest host. That's what we're going to call him from now on, a guest host, not a guest. Jagger Jones racing this weekend. So again, thank you to him for inviting us out. We had a great time.
Yeah, no, it was a great time, and definitely stay tuned because we're gonna have some content we will be releasing from that experience. And then we're actually working on something later this week too that I'm pretty excited about that we've been planning. So I think, yeah, like I said, we want to kind of broaden our horizons a little bit and not just be only a podcast, but also produce some other content
Well, just try to have fun, right? I
and
mean,
have fun. Absolutely.
that's ultimately what it's about. And I have a hell of a time doing this podcast. And anything we can do to just try to have fun and try to get people involved and just just try to engage different people and all those types of things. So yeah, like you said, and we've got something fun planned for the end of this week, and you were shooting video all weekend for something hopefully coming out toward the end of this month. And man, it's been just a great month so far. And it was I personally was not man enough to stay for the IndyCar race. Aaron and his father, they sat in the grandstands during a driving windstorm, and got to see a pretty crazy race.
Yeah.
So hats off to you for toughing it out, because
Well,
I saw the clouds coming and I was like, we're going to Union Jackson. We're going to go home and watch this thing on TV.
well, we were under the first turn grandstands of the oval, so they are completely covered. But we were up in the penthouse box, and it was getting pretty gnarly up there because there's nothing from behind, but we're down the bottom, and you're completely covered. So we were fine then. So it was a pretty good race from there, but it got pretty
Right.
cold up there on the penthouse box.
Yeah, I mean, temperature dropped 15 degrees, something like that.
Yeah, it was cold.
And then you were up in the wind on top of it. I mean, we walked out
Yeah, that
Union
was the
Jacks,
worst
man.
part.
That wind had really picked up.
Yeah, the wind was definitely the worst part. But before we get into anything else, our guest today is Scott Goodyear, like we said last week. Next week, we have some exciting stuff planned. So I think on Tuesday, we're going to release interview with two-time Indianapolis 500 winner, Alan Jr., which was a great interview, absolutely fantastic interview. And we definitely appreciate him being on. And we thought that, we recorded it a few weeks ago and we're like, yeah, we need to release this the week of the race. And actually, I don't know if I even noticed this at the time, but it is the 30th anniversary
30th anniversary
of the win, of his first win. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it really boy, speaking of weather, right? What a bad day that was.
Yeah.
But he man, we had a great talk. We didn't delve into some of the things that a lot of people like to talk with him about, more of the kind of the rough days he's had. I mean, it was such a good talk, just talking about his racing In
We
his
mentioned it a little.
career.
Well, I mean, we talked about it a little bit,
A little bit, but
but
some
not
people really
right.
focus on all that.
Yeah.
That's just not who we are as a show. But yeah, Little Al, man, he's so personable and he's such an honest dude. And he speaks with a lot of feeling. Like his answers are really like he means what he says, type of thing. In these interviews, like he just answers honestly, and
Yeah.
it was just a great time. I was so glad to be able to finally talk to him, and man, yeah. I mean, it was just really fun.
Absolutely. What a great guy. So we have that, and then also we're working on putting together a Indy 500 preview show like we did last year. So we're still trying to work out the details with that. But hopefully we'll be releasing that on probably Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday or Thursday,
Yeah.
just depending on what we can do.
Hmm.
Um,
Get some
and
guests
whatever,
lined up and stuff. Yeah, it
yeah,
depends on their
whatever Aaron's
availability.
schedule is, so he can get it edited down. Because as we all know, Aaron does all the work around here. Uh, but it was, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I had such a fun time last year. For people who didn't know, we did it last year. We had Spike Gilhausen. We had David Land.
And David predicted the winner.
David did predict the winner. And then it was you and I. And did we do something with Mark James before that too a little bit?
Not for the 500. I don't.
Not
We
for
didn't
the
have Mark
500.
until after the 500. I don't think.
Yeah, I couldn't remember, but yeah. Um, I just yeah, and this is something I've looked forward to all year, and we get to do it again. I'm very excited, and we're looking to add a few more people and to get some other voices besides mine involved in this. So really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, kind of like what we were saying before. Definitely a good race this past weekend. Obviously, the weather was a big part, but Colton Herta, man, what about? I mean, he was kind of talking about dirt tracks. I mean, he was kind of dirt tracking it through that one corner,
Yeah, it was really impressive. I don't know if I've ever seen a modern Indy car really get that
and
sideways
then he
and
passed them
really
in like two corners later.
right. And he passed a hell of a race car driver in Pato Ward. Um, so yeah, it was impressive, and he had an impressive run of the day, man. It was one of those races where guys were, they change the tires and maybe they go too soon in their tire change, and then they'd go back, and then was the track wet enough or not wet enough, and you had people just going up and down the order the entire end of the race. I'd say the last 40 laps. Unfortunately, they had a bunch of yellow flag laps in there too, but you just had people going up and down the order. Um, it was just, man, it was something to watch. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do I'm trying to think. Is there any other racing news that we should cover?
NASCAR ran. I could not tell you who won the race. I think it was. Well, I can't tell you who won the race. It was Kurt Busch. He was
Yeah,
strong in the section of the race I watched. Um, so yeah, Kurt Busch won. I couldn't tell you anything other than they kept having left rear flats for some reason. They definitely got the new car blues when it comes to the tires and NASCAR and the wheels. They'll get it figured out, but they've got a lot of work to do because these things are getting flats and they're high siding and they can't move, and these cars are having to get towed in, and I'd say this winter they'll obviously all year they'll work on the changes they need to do, and this winter they'll make the changes, and that'll get better. But right now they're just having some teething problems. But I couldn't tell you other than Kurt Busch how anybody else ran that race.
right. No, me. I did not watch it either. I will confess right now.
um, I like I said, we watched a ton of USF 2000 over the weekend.
And
What's
I
his
mean,
name? Hey,
pretty good
it
racing
was
for
good
sure.
racing. It was
Yeah,
really good racing. Aiden Quinn, I think was that his name? Aiden Quinn, come
Alex
from
Quinn.
Britain. Alex Quinn, sorry. He come from Britain and Great Britain, and first time he'd ever been in those cars. Although he had a lot of experience, driving similar cars over in
Sure.
Europe. He came over and he swept all 3 races. He started in the top 3 all 3 races. Jagger Jones sat on the pole for all 3 races. Michael D'Orlando, Jagger's teammate, was up there as well. Unfortunately, one of the races, Jagger had 2 podiums, the second and third. The first race on Saturday, he's running second to his teammate Michael D'Orlando. He get in the back of him. The rear tires locked up. He slid into the back of him, getting into one. Luckily for Michael, unfortunately for Michael, he lost the lead and he didn't get a chance to win the race. Luckily for Michael, he got to keep going, and he did run fifth, I believe. Jagger got a drive-through penalty, really put him down the order. But other news out of USF 2000, Miles Rowe, Penske finally signs over the money for the rest of the year, guarantees the money for the rest of the year. So Miles is fully funded now. So we'll definitely be able to see what he can do this year. And I'll tell you, that series is tough right now. I mean, I think the top 4 or 5 in points are separated by like 8 points or something like that. And
Jagger's still leading the points. I don't know if we mentioned
Jagger's leading points, I think, by 3 or 5. Something.
Yeah, not very
around
much.
there.
Yeah.
And then another former guest of the show, Dr. Jack Miller's son. He ran. He finished on the podium, right, of one of the races, like the first race on Saturday, I believe. So congratulations to him.
Great race.
Yeah, I mean he did. He looked great, and he had a bet with some other driver, and he got to shave his head, I believe, in victory lane. So
I didn't know about that.
You got to shave the other driver's head in victory lane, so that's pretty good. That's a fun day.
Yeah.
But hey, those junior ranks all had great racing, though, and great crop of race car drivers coming up.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, like I said, we definitely have some exciting things planned for the coming weeks. So definitely stay tuned. And yeah, I mean, we're deep into May right now. Tomorrow's the first day. Tuesday of this week. So we'll be releasing this on Wednesday. But tomorrow, as we're filming this or recording this, is the first day of practice on the oval. And I'll be out there all week. So definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, and it's really going to be interesting. It's so strange for me who grew up with the entire month of May, and then now it's so condensed down. But they turn a ton of laps. There's a lot of cars out there, and they get a lot of work in those few days, and it's going to be really interesting to see who's really good, and it's going to be especially interesting to see who's not so good, because every year there's somebody that you think should be up at the first 3 rows that's struggling to make the race. So we'll see if that happens again this year.
Well, so this year's exactly 33, so everyone will make the race.
Right. No, I understand that, but I mean, you're just struggling, like, to find speed and
Sure.
struggling.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To just I mean, struggling to get where you think you should be on the grid. I mean, we've seen the Will Powers of the world and the Alexander Rossi's of the world. Alonso's of the world. You just never know, right? Until those cars first roll off.
Oh, absolutely. Well, like we said, thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you haven't, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube and on Spotify, anywhere else where podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. And we'll give a quick shout out to Racer Collect. Definitely, if you're looking for any racing merchandise or memorabilia, definitely check them out, racercollect.com. Patrick's a great friend of the show and great guys. So definitely check them out. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and stay tuned next week for some special Indy 500 related podcasts we'll be releasing and Alan Jr. So everyone have a great week.
Take care, everybody.
Our guest today won races in kart, and in the Indy Racing League, he drove in 11 Indianapolis 500s, finishing second in 1992 and in 1997. He is currently the race director of Formula Regional and Formula 4 and SCCA. We're joined by Scott Goodyear. Scott, Thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real well, and anytime we can be talking about racing, it's pretty cool. So I love all the helmets and all the memorabilia you have back there. It's a pretty cool backdrop.
Thanks, and you were showing us some of your memorabilia before we recorded, which is really cool. So obviously, you had a great career in IndyCar, and you raced many different cars. Talk a little bit about how you first got interested in racing.
Well, it's as most people do, it's always in go-karts. And, I think the percentage both in IndyCar and F1 and probably people going to Le Mans and in IMSA, everybody seems to have started in karts, and much like I did. Mine was probably a little bit different because I was always driving mini bikes around our neighborhood. My dad was a motorcycle, snowmobile dealer. It was Kawasaki dealer, Skidoo type dealer. And we had a machine shop service with some stores in Toronto, Canada, where I was born. And so at the age of 7, when I wasn't old enough to race back then, you had to be 9 to start karts. Today, I think they start them at 5 or something like that, 5 or 6. But I used to travel with him when he went and did calls to go-kart tracks during the week in our home area of Toronto, Canada. And he'd go in there and sell all his wares and parts and things like that. And they'd always ask me, at the racetrack, you want to go drive the rental cart? There's nobody around during the week, right? In the mornings usually. So I'd go out there, they'd give me a helmet, they'd pull the cord, and I'd go out there and run around out of gas. So it was just started doing that for a couple of years. And then he started having me race karts at the age of 9 up in Toronto area, a place called Goodwood Kartways. So yeah, a lot of fond memories. Everybody starts in karts.
Right. So did you follow, I don't know, IndyCar racing back then or Formula One? Did you have any dreams or aspirations when you were that young to, race in the Indy 500, racing Formula One?
I'm sure that I did, and maybe some kids can remember back then. I think I probably started to think about that in my early teens, if you will. And I always thought, no, it'd be really cool to go do that. It'd be fun to go do that if that was the case. But I can't say that. I watched the Indy 500. My dad was always watching the Daytona 500. In Canada at that time, I have to tell you that I only knew that there was one IndyCar race because that's the only one we had in television was the Indy 500. We didn't get everything else. So, whether we were a lot of times going to a go-kart track when I was younger, we were listening to it in the radio in the pits a lot of times because we were racing that weekend. I probably didn't really realize that there was more races than just Indy or something like that until I was in my teens, as strange as that is. But, we didn't have an IndyCar. There was an IndyCar race in Canada in 1967, I think was the first one, but too young for me to sort of remember all that. But the Toronto race didn't come to Toronto, downtown streets of Toronto until 1986. And I wasn't even living in Canada at that time because I was off trying to get my career going in different places in the States and Europe. Yeah.
What was the first? So you did karts. So how many years did you do karts for?
I started doing that when I was 9 and did all the way until I was 17, 18 years old. I went through the John Powell Racing School, Formula Ford Racing School at Mosport Park, Canada, which is now known as Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, where they run NASCAR trucks and IMSA cars, when I was 19. And that's when I got the bug where I thought, man, I'm going to go racing. Not sure how I was going to do it, but my parents helped me a little bit. I sold everything I had. I was into cars, into music, working on cars, and I sold everything that I didn't need. Even had a couple of old cars that I'd fixed up that I really enjoyed. 66 Cutlass and odds and ends back in that era, and sold everything and got myself a Datsun B210, something that was a 4-cylinder. And you're laughing, you know exactly what that is. So, which needed, I'm glad I kept my tools because I need my toolbox in the back of the trunk to fix the thing all the time when I was trying to go to races. But, and I went and got a loan that my dad co-signed for, and I bought my first Formula Ford. I went and got a loan for $20,000. And a lot of money. And my dad obviously co-signed the loan. And I started Formula Ford racing at the age of 20 up in Toronto, which is, starting to get into cars in today's standards. That's old. Like I said, I'm the race director, as you mentioned, for F4 and F3/FR in this country. And we have 15-year-olds coming to race Formula 4 cars now. which is the first step on the ladder getting up to F1, obviously. And then we now have what basically we call an F4 junior. It's called the Speed Tour Development Program. And we're 14-year-olds are now coming out of karts and driving cars. So yeah, I was 20 already. So that was pretty old back then.
Did you, so you just dove in head first. I mean, you just, hey man, this is what I'm going to do. What was that moment that prompted that? Like, what led you to believe, I believe in myself. I can do this.
What prompted me to do it was actually taking the school. And that era, if you can recall back, that was like in 1980, Gilles Villeneuve was making his mark in Formula One, the great F1 driver, Canadian driver out of Quebec. And I went to the John Powell Racing School and slid in the cockpit of a red Lola race car. And to me, I was just sliding in a red Ferrari, just like Gilles Villeneuve, So I mean, and they get in there, and and that's why I know exactly. I lived it with my own son, Michael, who did a lot of karting and some car racing for quite a few years, and he's now becoming he's now a pilot with Republic Airlines. And but I saw it with him, and I see it with all the kids that come to us now. You slide inside that cockpit and they start putting the belts over you. You put a 6-way harness on and they click it all together and pull the belts tight like they did in that Formula 4 day, that day in the school. You're sold. That's all you need to do, So for me, I think I knew what I wanted to do. And I remember coming home after day 1 of 3 days. And I said to my mom that, you know what? I know what I want to do. I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to go be a race car driver. So, I'm sure his moms are like, okay, that's great. We'll see. And at that time I was working for my dad's business. It was actually a machinist and a licensed small engine mechanic, working on all the stuff. And I love doing it still today, if I ever could. And just started racing cars and did that for 3 years in Formula Ford. Was 80, 81, 82, and got to almost $100,000 in debt, $87,000 in debt. And I thought that, if you won, I mistakenly thought that you were going to just move on. And obviously that doesn't happen. So I was very fortunate for being able to race Formula Ford for 3 years, was, like I said, severely in debt. And I stopped racing for a couple of years, started a racing school with a colleague of mine up in Canada. And I thought I was done. I was just paying back bills. And fortunately, I had a call from a previous team that I drove Formula Ford for, and they had a driver that was racing F2000 cars. And the driver couldn't make a race that September at Trois-Rivières, Quebec, which is a big race up there at the Trois-Rivières track. And he called me and said, you want to go try it? You haven't been in a car for a while. So I actually went out and drove one of my Formula Ford school cars. I'd Crossley Formula Ford school cars. I hadn't been in a car a year and a half. And shake the rust off and went to Trois-Rivières and went racing. And that was the beginning of, the second chance to get going. And it worked out.
Did, but that's a funny thing that you just mentioned. A lot of people, and I'm sure it's the same way with maybe music or whatever, because these are such odd careers, auto racing and that these paths we take. And what's really interesting is when you first start, you're like, how can I find the money? And then as you go along, you realize somehow or another you accrue all this debt and you have kind of no idea how you even accrued it. It's just, you'll look in your shop one day and you'll have all this stuff and you're like, where did this all come from?
Yeah, it was, I was racing for a chap by the name of Colin Hine. And he was so gracious. And Colin is just going to be inducted in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. He's done so much for Canadian racers and the Canadian racing industry. It's really tremendous. I had my Formula Ford debt. I had engine debt. I had tire debt. I had borrowed money from people. And you just live in it and digging in and, can I do this? And okay, somebody helps you a little bit more. And I did not pay off that December of 1979 to use the car in 1980. I did not pay off that debt until October of 1986. I took the winnings from winning the North American Formula Atlantic Championship and paid off my debt. That's how long I was paying the debt on that. If you can believe it. Yeah. crazy.
Oh, I believe it.
And I've tried to guide my son, who was immensely talented, but had to give Michael more of, the honest, true facts about the sport, that probably my dad didn't know, because, he was a businessman and, yes, involved in some racing, go-karting and what have you. But, we were understanding car racing, or getting to learn car racing. I eat, breathe, and sleep it for the last 30 years of my life. So, as I said to my son, Michael, you have to eat, breathe, and sleep it. We wanted him to continue with his education. But it is very difficult. I mean, and I didn't look at that then. I mean, it's very difficult for me to tell my son to do as I'm telling him, not to do as I did, right? And so that is very difficult, in the sense that, I explained to him, there's only 33 seats, 33 jobs available every May at 16th and Georgetown down here at the Speedway, out of all the thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people that want to go racing. And I think it took me to be out of the sport from driving, and then into television for all those years. And now probably more so coming around full circle to the grassroots level where I'm at now, to really understand how fortunate I was. But you don't think about that when you're doing it. All you're thinking about is it's like an addiction, getting to the next race. I talk about my Datsun B210, and I was working 3 jobs, and I had the opportunity to either get a hotel on race weekends for my Formula Ford, or buy a new set of tires. You can imagine what I did. I bought a new set of tires, and I slept in the back.
I know exactly what you did.
Yeah, slept in the back of the Datsun B210, and then used the cold and nasty showers either at Saint Javide or Saint Air, Quebec, or what have you. When I raced at Mosport, I was living at home, obviously, but it didn't matter. So, and then I got to partner up with a very good friend of mine, Robin Buck, who was a great racer. And, we scraped enough money together to be able to share gas to get to racetracks and split a hotel. So we weren't sleeping in the back of a car. Yeah.
Living like kings then.
Yeah. You know what? If you had, anybody that was giving free food out of the racetrack, I mean, boy, you were pretty happy.
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. It's, I think one of the differences today than even when you came up is there was a chance at a payout. There was a little wider chance of a payoff at the end of the rainbow. And today that's a very narrow road. And
I would completely agree. And I'll tell you a funny story there, going back to my son Michael. He had just started doing a car school here. Went to the Skip Barber School at Road Atlanta, and one of my old teams, Pfaff Motorsport, which Pfaff just won the 24 Hours Daytona and GT Pro, and had won Sebring before. Chris Pfaff is a good friend of mine that owns Pfaff dealerships, and he called and just said, "Hey, bring him up and we'll put him in a car. He can do some driving." And a couple of things. Number one, I think it was fall of 2017. My son Michael and I did a 3-hour race up there in a BMW touring car for Pfaff, and in GT2 class, of which we won the GT2 class. And out of all the stuff that I've done, and Indy, you talk about, or standing in the podium at Le Mans for the Porsche factory, there was nothing better than standing there with my own son on a podium.
Sure.
That was pretty cool. And I don't think we went up there thinking about that. I went up there just for him to get the experience of racing the car, a long distance race, Mosport, which is a great racetrack, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. So, but on one of those trips up there for practice and testing, that was when Tony Kanaan was no longer going to be retained from Ganassi. And we were somewhere in Michigan going towards the Canadian border, and my son's looking at his phone. He goes, "Dad, you're not going to believe this. Tony Kanaan's not staying with Ganassi. They're releasing him." And Tony's comments are something along the lines, "I'd hate to be a young guy today looking to make a living in motor racing, because it's all about the money, not about the talent." When I was coming up, and I said this to my son a lot, you'd get called. You'd win Formula Ford races, and I was getting called by Atlantic teams, to see if you had a budget. But at least they saw you and saw that you were winning. So, hey, come on, try an Atlantic car. I didn't have the money, so I didn't get to go do it. But, as I continued moving up the ladder, you got calls from endurance teams. Went to a Daytona 24-hour one time with Jack Roush, because I'd won the Atlantic Championship, and they started looking for these young up and coming drivers, if you will. And that was the opportunity back then. Even with the IndyCar stuff, even with the Porsche factory, the Audi factory. When I got the Audi factory ride, I got a call to go over there and got picked up by the Audi executives and went to Hockenheim and didn't know who the test driver was for the team. And then I went to track the next morning and walked in and found out it was Hans Struck. That was the test driver for Audi, which was he's the factory driver, and that's who I was going against to see if I was going to get the ride. But you were getting calls, and we got the ride, which was great. But and Hans became a very good friend and advocate for me because I ended up getting the Porsche factory ride in 1996 for the GT1 car at Le Mans. But my point is that people are calling you today. You may get called if they know A, you have the ability, and B, and probably more so, if you have the budget. And if you don't have the budget, they're not going to be calling you if they don't think that you have the funding. And that's the biggest thing. And that's why I was explaining to my son, Michael, is that, today it's more about a combination of both. You have to be good on the racetrack and off the racetrack, especially with the media and social media and what have you. More important today than obviously my era. But you certainly need to have a budget to go with your ability and talent. Whereas in my era, as long as you weren't being arrested and causing problems and, and in jail, as long as you could drive a race car, boy, they wanted you to come and drive a race car. And, now as it has become a business, more professional, but it's become a business, not just, Gore Racing. I'm sure if you guys know that name, Gore Racing. Dick Hammond owned the Genesis distributorship in Western New York. Had a car that Indy car that he was running. Gary Bettenhausen driving and doing it on ovals, and they thought we need to just go do some road courses. I got a phone call. Hey, do you want to come and try this out? Because they were looking for somebody. That would never happen today. Never happen today.
Yeah, it's a tough part of the sport to swallow. But it's something that unfortunately you just got to do. If you want to do it, you got to figure out how to get money. I mean, that's just bottom line. And I don't know any other way to say it. That if you are lucky enough to be one of the chosen later on, if you can win and win and win and win and show you can win and have a following and you can bring that recognition to someone. There's a couple rides, obviously, better than me, that you can still get paid to do it, but there's not many.
Saying that, if I may say, it's interesting because I mentioned that Tony not being able to stay with Ganassi. My comment to my son was, in my day, when I got to IndyCar kart in 1990 as a rookie, there's 26, 28 cars. I mean, sometimes they were sending some people home at racetracks like Phoenix when they didn't have enough pit spots, 31 or 32 people would show up. It was interesting because back then there was probably 6 or 8 people that were not making a living out of it. They had to bring their money. Everybody else, all the way through 14th, 16th or 18th driver, whatever it was in the field, got paid to drive a race car, which was remarkable when you think about it. And then I was explaining to my son that, today is different. There's probably 6 or 8 people, and I think it's grown a little bit in the last couple of years, but, say 8 people, maybe 10 people now that are making a living because they got chosen because of their ability and their talent. The Penske's, the Andretti's of the world, the Chip Ganassi teams of the world and what have you. And everything else is a business package, the money off the track and all that sort of stuff. So it's swapped now. It's completely changing because IndyCar has grown so much here in the last couple of years. It's just tremendous to see. And, you've gone from at one time, I think I called 7 honest paid guys to probably whatever it is now, 12 or 14, maybe even more, that are not there because of a business package, if you will. But it is a business. It absolutely, it consumes money. The budgets now, back in my era, gosh, we used to get a new car or 2 new cars every year, and you had a budget of $3.5–4 million. The top teams at that time were probably spending 5 or 6, which is your Newman Haas and what have you. But you think about how expensive it got now. We get the same car for 5, 6, 7 years, 8 years, and the engines are turnkey, if you will. I remember when I started, 1990 back, had a Judd for the first 2 years of the Indy 500. They said that, you can't run it flat out all 500 miles. So you can go and then we're going to slow you down for a couple hundred miles in the middle and bring your RPMs down just to make sure you can get to the end. So it was a complete departure from today. I mean, all the equipment's so good, it just, runs like clockwork.
I think a prime example where we're talking about, it being mostly money. Now, the Kyle Crookwood situation, a lot of people have been talking about that. A lot of people feel like he should have been in the Andretti car. I mean, he's proven he can win. I mean, he won, how many races last year? Most of the season, right?
He won a ton of them. He was an F4 champion in our series. He was an F3 champion. He was F3 FR champion in our series. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's what you look at. And does he have the ability? Absolutely. Was all the backing there? Maybe not. Right. So, he had the package from coming from winning the Indy Lights series. So, and that's sort of what we have. Our series is, if you win the F4 championship, then you get a ride in the F3/FR series. And if you win the F3/FR series, some of our champions have gone on to Indy Lights, like Linus Lindquist, who actually ran last year. He had won our series. And then David Malukas was second at that point in time. A lot of the guys matter of fact, all the guys in Indy Lights this past year, all race winners, pole sitters, and fastest lap winners came out of either running or winning in our F3/FR class. Pretty impressive. And it's, it's a stepping stone, if you will, from our series to get to Indy Lights. So I get the pleasure of watching a lot of these guys come up and come through. And Kevin Simpson won the series last year, the FR series last year, and he's in Indy Lights this year. So it's neat to be able to see our guys graduate and then move up into not only to the Indy Lights and then also into IndyCar stuff.
Right.
You got that picture behind you of you and Al, and really after such a horrible day. I mean, the race itself, I mean, we've talked to different guests who were in that race, and it's such a tough day. And then you guys have just the most amazing finish. And of course, there's Al after the race, jubilant, and then there's you after the race. It's just your heart's ripped out. And that being said, when you look back at it today, do you find that because you've done so much? I mean, looking at your resume, I mean, it's as impressive as anybody's. And do you find that at least opens a door to be able to, like, people know Scott Goodyear from that, but then it allows them that you to give the opportunity to talk to them about your career and the things that you've done. So do you have, I guess what I'm trying to say is, looking back at it today, do you have different feelings about that moment than you did at the moment it happened?
And I think it's gone through different evolutions, if you will, from the fact that should I have been disappointed on that day? Probably not, because so much was against us to even get to the race, and let alone, the last, 10 laps or what have you. But, we, as I said, started Indy with a Judd engine. So I had a 89 car and a Judd engine in 1990, year-old car. So, which was sliding around. I got out at the end of that race and I thought, I can never do this. I don't know how these guys do it, because that thing, the 89 car, they had to change diffusers and all this sort of stuff to make it legal. It was awful, but I didn't know any different, right? I'm just getting in there and it was just completely crazy. We get to the very next race at Milwaukee, because it was always Milwaukee the weekend after Indy. And hardly even knew him, but Rick Mears comes up and just said, "Hey, I want to tell you did a great job." Talking about the first year in 1990. I'm going, "What are you talking about?" He goes, no, because we finished 10th and finished our first 500. And I thought, well, that was very nice. And then in 91, we had a new car, but we had the Judd engine still. So it was 92 before I actually had current equipment, if you will. But there was a problem in the oil tank when it was built, that the scavenging tube was actually too short. So we could not run a long distance in our 92 Chevrolet because we were sucking oil and the engine was seizing up. I could feel it even before. Telemetry today would show you, but in the old stuff back then, it wasn't coming up as well. And I was coming in telling the team, I'm telling you, this thing is starting to seize up. I mean, I've been building this stuff all my life. And so we ended up qualifying the 91 car with a Chevrolet engine, because if you recall back then, weekend one was qualifying. Everybody practicing weekend two. A lot more people showed up back then. I think the first year I was there was some 53 drivers got physicals to run at the speedway. Obviously a lot of people walking around holding their helmets and all that sort of stuff. And I just wanted to qualify in 1990. Luckily, obviously we did. And but in 92, we went and took the 91 car just to get it in the show, because Derek Walker was running the program. As we found the problem during the week, we go to second qualifying weekend. I thought, great, we'll take that car out and I'll get my regular car. We're going to have to start near the back anyways, but the car was absolutely superb, especially from the first two cars that I had in 99. And then Derek said, what I'd like to do, if you're okay with it, I'm going to get somebody else to qualify the car. If you go in and qualify, you're going to be back in the back part of the grid anyways. But if we get another person to qualify it, and then we'll switch cars, you'll get into your current car, the other driver will get into the 91 car, and we'll have two entries into the Indy 500. And I said, perfect. McKinsey Financial was fine with it. Mike Groff qualified our car, and in the end result, the 91 car, I didn't go fast enough in the 91 car, a year-old car, and it got bumped out. So Mike, unfortunately, to make the field, I got back into my 92 car. And so it was crazy just even getting that far. And then the cold weather and slipping and sliding. And just one quick story on that. Just before Roberto Guerrero went off on the pace lap, if you can recall, in 92, because he was on pole, I had just said to Derek Walker on the radio, I go, Derek, I said, I cannot get any tire temperature in here. I almost just lost the car because I was at the last end of it. So I'm weaving, trying to really build up tire temperatures. And I said to him, man, I almost just lost it. And he goes, Scotty, as he always says, just take your time. We'll just get going, build some temperature. And like in the next end of the track, Guerrero goes off, commit to, and then they get a report on that. And Derek gets on the horn and he goes, God damn it, Scotty, I told you just to stay pat in the back of the track and all that sort of stuff, and back of the pack, because he thought it was me that spun out. Right. He didn't recall. And I'm going, Derek, it's not me. I'm fine. It's not me. So it was hilarious. And we hadn't taken the green flag yet, right? So that was hilarious. But that day was, you'd go through the turn and the car would slide. And we would come up on somebody and the thing would just go across the road. And you had to gauge that on the way in and how much it would slide to get to the wall. And I mean, I went to school on that because I didn't do oval racing in my life at all until I got to Indy cars. And that's probably, when I look at it now, years after I was started to drive some oval stuff, I didn't know what to do, honestly. It was my third Indy 500, my 12th or 14th oval race in my life. And Al Jr. had been there since 1983, I think it was. Grew up in Super Vs and doing the ovals and all that sort of stuff. And, maybe if I had more experience, maybe I would have had a better shot at it. But as it turns out, still today, the closest finish, and it probably still shocks me to that. And I will tell you that still 50% of the fan mail that comes in today is still around the 1992 race. And interestingly, as IndyCar has grown and going to different countries around the world, and even when they started going to Japan, and I'm doing television at that time, they get more fans and they go back and they look at the history of the sport, and they're finding pictures or ordering it from the Speedway or what have you from the 1992 finish. And they're sending it from all these different places around the world. And we're talking 15, 20, 25 years, right? Old and still a major thing to them. So I did not know what it meant at that point in time. You talked about Al's jubilation. And for me, in tears, I should have been pleased with, just from all the stuff I just explained, that we had a shot at winning it. You wouldn't have convinced me of that starting at the very back. So, and now the Al's with Future Star Racing, which is a team that's in our series, we see each other all weekends, and so it's fun to come back and we chat about it every once in a while, have some fun.
I bet. Well, it's an iconic moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's all you can say about it. I mean, just that whole it's just it's a crazy to have such an amazing finish when the day was so rough for so
Yeah.
many people.
Yeah.
Um,
And let me
that's
just
all
add one other thing. I guess I'll add this too, because, I, over all those years was, I didn't understand it from the sense that I felt like I said I lost. I finished second. I didn't win the race. So what's everything all? Why is everybody excited about this? And like I said, the mail coming in and it turned to corporate speaking and obviously and endorsements and things like that. So absolutely, it was a great thing from my perspective. If you recall, Sam Hornish Jr. and Marco Andretti.
Oh, I recall it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm in the booth and, and then when it gets to about the last lap or certainly coming out of turn 2, the analyst, Eddie Cheever, and I step away from it. And then you let the play-by-play guy do the call and coming to the finish, right? So obviously I'm engaged in the booth and doing my job, but for the last half a lap, you get to be a bit of a race fan and sort of watch the race unfold, if you will. And a lot of times it's just the play-by-play guy calling the cars around because it's spread out and what have you. This one, if you can recall, we all thought Marco was winning it coming out of turn 4, and I'm sitting there thinking, I can remember this like it was yesterday. Michael and I used to race Formula Fords against each other back in the early 80s. So Michael Andretti and I have known each other forever. And, I'm out there thinking, how cool is this for Marco? And Andretti's going to win, thinking about that all the way from turn 4, coming down the front stretch and all this sort of stuff. And then all this happens and Sam Hornish gets him at the line. And I went, oh, man, that was so cool. How close was that? And then the whole place erupts and everything like that. And so we're going through, we finish our on-air program, we finish ESPN, Sports Desk, and all the stuff that we're doing. I'm on the drive home. Like I said, I just live 30 minutes from the Speedway. And the light switch goes on. I go, wow, now I get it. Now I understand why everybody was so thrilled about 1992, because I became a fan for the last half of a lap and just saw the most amazing closest finish that I've ever seen in my life. And yes, I'm in the booth, but I'm still a fan. And so it took me, how many years was that, from 1992 onwards to be working in television for me to really understand what the fans were experiencing sitting in the stands. It took that long.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. I thought Marco had it won. I'm standing in the suites off 2. I watch him go down the back straightaway. I watch him go into 3, got a massive lead. And then when he goes across the short chute, I said, oh no, he lifted. Because that's how fast Hornish looked like he was catching him. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe he lost the nose. Something happened. And I'm not saying he did lift. I mean, I'm just saying that's what it looked like. And sure enough, he got him past him. I couldn't believe it.
It doesn't take much.
I know exactly.
Like Al in turn 4, just giving just with the horsepower we had back then, just giving just a little bit of a breathe so he wouldn't push off the turn. And those things there, I mean, it's just how you enter the turn off a center and getting the car to float through the turn. And you just have to do one thing a little bit incorrectly and you can scrub off speed like you wouldn't believe. So, yeah, that was, it's amazing. So it took that long. So now I get it. I mean, and I always appreciate the fan mail that comes in, and I've got a stack from probably in December I haven't even got to yet, but it's, it's all still the 92 stuff, which is now I always appreciate it, probably appreciate it more now. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So going back a little bit, a couple of years, so your first Indy 500, what was that experience like? Because I mean, I would guess obviously that's the biggest race you were in at that point. And there's 300, 400,000 people on race day. I mean, was it an overwhelming experience? Like the pace laps, we've talked to a couple of drivers about the pace laps. I think the best story was from Willie T. Rips. Al Jr. apparently told him that the women would flash you in the snake pit. So he was driving around. He was driving around the track, and he had his seatbelts loose, and he was like looking over.
I had done Le Mans a couple of years before I got to Indy with the Brunn team in Germany in a Porsche 962. So fortunately, I'd been 235, 40 miles an hour and driving those big beasts that they had over there. And that was before they put the kinks in them all set and straight. So had some appreciation for that. I remember I'll tell you first off, I mean, I knew in 89, I thought I was going to have a shot at being there. So I came to the Speedway and I took the bus ride around like you all do, went through the museum and everything like that. And then you get there and you go through rookie orientation. Rookie orientation back then used to be sometimes weeks ahead of the 500. I mean, now it seems to be all combined in sometimes. And it was, quite a few rookies, probably 5 or 6 at that point in time, and going through all the different levels that you have to go through and some classroom stuff and what have you. Johnny Rutherford was the coach at that time for us. And I remember going around with him and talking about the track and what it does and going around slowly and getting out in the track and looking at the track. And then you get in the car, in the pace car, and then you go out for a lap. I was scared to death. Okay. I'm in the passenger seat and I'm thinking, we're looking like as fast as this, I can't remember what it was, as fast as this thing would go, we're doing whatever it is, 140, 150. And I'm on the right-hand side, closest to the wall. And I'm just going, and the thing's moving. I just thought, man, this is not going to end very well. But he knew the thing's rolling up to the wall, coming out of one to the short chute. It was really a tremendous ride, but scared the daylights out of me. So that was probably the first thing I felt. The second thing was going through the bus ride. And then with Johnny Rutherford, it takes a long time to get around the racetrack. You sit in the IndyCar and you go out on the apron. Remember, the aprons were back then. They didn't have the access roads like they have now. And you sit in the apron, you're really low in the car, and you come around turn 2, and then you end up on the racetrack, and you're looking down there, and boy, that turn 3 is a long ways away. Well, after you start going around a couple of laps, and you realize turn 3 is not that far away because you get there pretty darn quick. So that was a lot of fun. And all through the testing of rookie orientation, and I was just telling somebody this story the other day on another interview, that it was pretty fulfilling in a sense that you're at the Indianapolis 500, but and I'm not sure that you're thinking of the race. You're just trying to make sure that you can absorb as much as you need to learn so you can hopefully make the race, is what you're doing at that point in time. Or for me, what I was doing with no oval experience. And they opened up the track. I think the rookies got the next day in the morning, and then the veterans got out after lunch or something like that. And I leave the pit lane and I'm on the apron, and like I said, no warm-up lanes back then. I was about the middle of turn 1, basically the apex, and a car goes by and goes right past my right side wheels. I mean, it startled me. I mean, so close, so fast, and what have you. It was Mario Andretti. Okay. And just, I guess everybody does it. They use the car so close, and they know that you're going to stay in the lane and be on the inside of the line and what have you. I mean, I was like, you're just like, okay, can I do this? You just get out there and try and get up to speed and not be in anybody's way. So as the week wore on, got to be more confident, got up to speed. So that felt really, really good. I will tell you on getting qualified, and I think we qualified the first year, 21st, with the old car and the jet engine. I was just, the first weekend, I was just hoping nobody went faster the second weekend, which they didn't, obviously. So we started the race. I remember everybody saying to me, when you go out on race morning, whatever you do, just don't look up. And I'm going, what do you mean? When you walk out of the garage, because I didn't know they gave you a time to walk out of the garage to get to your car and all that sort of stuff. So we're going through that procession, and my wife's with me, Leslie, and we're walking out, and we're holding hands, and I guess my hand squeezed or something like that. She says, "What's wrong?" I said, "Whatever you do, don't look up." And so what does she do? She like that and looks up and just sees, obviously, 12 or 20 stories of people, and oh my gosh, and all of that. And then she goes, oh my gosh, look at that, So I was just like, I was sort of like, wow, because you're there at the track first thing in the morning, and it's quiet. There's not really any movement, any warmth, any noise, if you will, when you get there early, and obviously all builds, but you're inside the garage or your motorhome, and you don't really know what's going on. And for me, that was just like, wow, now I realize how big this event is. And then getting in the car, with all the festivities that are going on and all the fanfare, I mean, it was really, really cool. And the 3 wide start, it was difficult, to say the least. Still amazed that they still do it today, obviously, because, the track is so narrow, but it's part of tradition. I'm sure it will never change. And then just getting to take the green flag. I remember, and they tell you this, and people can tell you all the stuff they want, but you need to live it. learned it with my son too, when he was driving karts and then cars. You go down and people said, the fumes, methanol back then, the turbulence, and, you're going down there because I'm obviously, quite a ways back, and the fumes coming in through the car, it was like your eyes were burning. I thought, my God, I'm not going to make it. And then the start itself, shaking, you can't see because your head's rattling so much. And then you take your foot off the gas and the car keeps going, keeps accelerating because you're being sucked along. And, I'm thinking like, gosh, the throttle stuck or something like that. All the stuff's happening, right, and you've never experienced it before. And people can tell you, but until you live it, it's. But I will tell you that I was so exhausted that night. We finished 10th, got back and did my obligations for the sponsor for McKinsey Financial Corporation. And I was probably asleep by 9:00 at night. I was done. Wow. Worn out, just completely worn out, driving something that was so, almost loose. And, like I said, the 89 car with the diffuser change they did to make it legal, it was terrible. In 91, a short race, because our engine blew up in 92, even after all that, exhausted and elated, but really starting in 93, you finish the 500, you could go do another one because you're much more relaxed now. You understand what's going on. So yeah, you can go do 2 of them in a row, 3 of them in a row, but not the first time out. There's no way. Yeah.
You started sorry.
I was just going to say, compare that with Le Mans. I mean, what was that like the first time you went out?
Le Mans was very different because, the practice starts there usually Wednesday, Thursday in the evening, and Le Mans is all normal private roads, if you will. And a lot of people they're being used during the day, and late in the day, they go ahead and they start putting up all the guardrail in front of all the openings for people. You're going down a country road, if you will, and then there's a guardrail opening and people driving to their houses. So there's not really a whole lot of practice and testing there. That was my first time of meeting Hans Stuck, who's a Porsche factory driver. And I went to speak to him about driving the 962 and the kink and all that sort of stuff. And I remember him saying to me, he goes, I said, Hans, now down the straight. And I said, do I lift? What do I do? Slow down, brake for the kink and stuff like that. And he goes, no, yeah, flat, Scotty, don't worry, just flat. And so you're going around the first time. It's a long time before you get to the kink. And, I got out of the car from the co-driver, so the tires warm and all that sort of stuff the first night of practice. And I'm driving down there and, his words are echoing in my head. And I got to the kink, and it was the biggest lift that I've ever had in my life because you just can't do it, but it took like 4 or 5 times. And then you feel, because you're going fast, you got to understand lines and all that sort of stuff. Probably smart that I did lift, but Le Mans itself was a spectacle. And I've been there now a couple of times. The last time I was there was in 1996 with the Porsche factory. And we finished second in class, third overall. And again, Stuck, Terry Bootson and Bob Wallach were on one car, and then Carl Wendlinger and Yannick Dummes and myself were on the other. It was because I had been there before with Brun, which was a tremendous experience. Being there with the Porsche factory was gave me the understanding of what it's probably like to drive for a Penske or somebody like that in IndyCar. It was just organized. You needed for nothing. Mechanics. Just the depth of information and what have you. And still one of the highlights for me to be able to walk out on that gondola, if you will, where they do the all the drivers come out for the first 3 and stand on the podium, and then all the sea of people rush the pit lane. So that was pretty cool. That was in that car there, the Porsche GT1s, and at that time they put the kinks in, and but you were still doing top speed, and they got on the brakes, and we punished that car like you wouldn't believe. For me, it was pretty cool because I was in the car when the race finished, so got to go across the line, the 2 of us side by each, if you will, which was pretty darn cool. So pretty neat experience. Anytime you're with a factory like that or the Audi factory, I think you really realize just the level of commitment they have and the ability that they have. It's almost like being an F1 team, I'm sure. It's just there's the resources are there, everything is there, including chefs. I had to go over to Austria to train ahead of time, and with a facility called Willy Dungle at that time, which was working with all the F1 drivers back in those days. It's almost like the pit fit, if you will, of today's world in IndyCar. Pretty huge commitment to drive for one of those guys. It was pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool.
So going back to the 500 just for a sec, I was going to ask. So you started from all different positions in the 500. You started from last. You started on the front row. I mean, generally speaking, you want to get the pole, but as you know, it's a 500-mile race. A lot can happen. I mean, what was kind of the ideal position in your mind to start? Because I mean, if you're starting, towards the back of the field, you got all the fumes and stuff. But I'm guessing there's also a lot of pressure on you from starting on the front row.
I think that there is. That year in '95 with the Honda, we were, thought we had a shot at the front row. I'm not sure with pole, but that was the year that the Buicks came along, and with Scott Brayton, great guy, rest his soul, and then Ari Leyendyke. So I was flat chat. I mean, no lifting, as hard as I could drive, and thought, whatever we qualified at 230 and change. I can't remember what the average was. And, it was, I thought we had a shot until really the Buick showed up. So, but it was fun, to be on the front row, and just pictures somewhere around here of the three of us there. Speaking of Le Mans, in '96, I was actually, just remembering, with Scotty Brayton, I was in Europe at the time when my wife called me when he had crashed at Indy and got killed. That was something that when you're by yourself over there, you gave a lot of time to soul search. It was pretty difficult, but he, such a character that he was, always smiling, full of pranks and everything of that nature. But, it was sort of fun for us back then in '95. And, we were able to get to turn one first and led, and which is really what you want to do if you can do it cleanly without putting yourself in confrontation with anybody else. So yeah, front row is definitely the place to be, and start a lot of rows in between, and also the back road. And maybe the back row is not too bad. You get to go to the last row party, so always a lot of fun.
Well, you used to get that check too, right? Start 33rd, you get 33 cents.
It's over here somewhere in all this stuff. Yeah, I think 33 cents or 32 cents. I think I've got a couple of them. Yeah, was back there a couple of times. Yeah. Never cash it. I'm sure nobody ever does. It's just.
I wouldn't be shocked if Sneva didn't cash his, but the rest of them I can see never being cashed.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Sneva drove. He drove a rear engine sprint car my dad worked on. That's how I know Tom. But,
yeah, some of the great names. I was watching those guys when I was trying to get involved in this sport, and I remember going to my first drivers meeting in 1990 and looking around and seeing all the names. You just mentioned it. It was like looking around and seeing Andretti's and Unzers and Rahals and Fittipaldis, and just sitting there looking. I'm going, this kid out of Canada. I'm looking around going, what am I doing here? It was just like, it was royalty in there, no doubt. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. When you're in that position, for you at least, and of course this proved to be much different in reality than perception, right? Your perception. Did you feel that like you had a little bit of imposter syndrome at first? Like, I don't belong with these guys? Or was that not really, you were just like, wow, I can't believe this is real type thing?
Yeah, probably just wanting to do a good job, and hopefully that you can learn and prove to everybody that you belong there, I guess, really to a point. Yeah. Because you just know that you have so much that you need to know or need to learn. And, it's interesting that, and it takes a while before you feel like, even though people come up to you and tell you, hey, great job or what have you, or, you get some success and get close to a podium or whatever. For me, it wasn't, we won in 92 was the first one that we had won. But I'll tell you, for me, probably I felt like I belonged when Phoenix of 1993, we sat on pole, got below Rick Mears' track record, and on the outside pole was Mario Andretti, my childhood hero. And that's honestly, it wasn't winning races or something like that. It was, we only won a handful, or finishing well. Those other times finishing well, podiums, and getting to look around, Ray Hall's there, Michael, what have you. I mean, that felt really good. I will tell you that for me personally, I felt like, okay, I guess maybe I do belong here, was actually being on pole, because it had nothing to do with race pace or traffic or something like that. Just going out there, and at Phoenix at that time, you were still lifting a little bit in one, but if you were going to go fast, you were flat out in 3 and 4, which I will tell you is hauling those things at that speed was a ride. And it gripped at the very last minute as you're looking at the wall coming at turn 3, going to turn 4. And you just have to believe it's going to do what you hope it's going to do. So for me, that was probably the point where, that's now 3-4 years into driving IndyCars, that it took me that long before I thought, okay, maybe hopefully I get the respect or I respect myself enough that I feel like I belong there. Yeah.
So that was your moment of validation, like this
for me. Yeah. Even though, we had great battle and won Michigan, and battling with Mario and Paul Tracy and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, for me personally, I guess that was the most satisfying, if you will. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Really cool. So when you kind of, get done with your driving, you move into TV. How did that whole thing come about?
It was funny because I was retiring after with Panther, and I was going to step away in 2000, and we had finished second in the championship. And Eddie Cheever at that point in time, and I'll go back a little bit, Eddie and I never got along when we were on kart, never got along from something that happened at Detroit, the very first time that I went to Detroit in 1990. He had been on the F1 track there. I had not, nobody had been there from an IndyCar perspective. And we just never got along. So, and as it is now, he lives just a few streets over. We're good friends, family, and get together, obviously, because of our time in television for so long. I drove for Eddie because he was doing the Infinity program, and he talked me into doing a development program and then doing the Indy 500, which I was glad to do because I always obviously want to win the Indy 500, and I was stepping away. I was still doing some endurance racing at that point in time in Daytona Prototype with in the IMSA series, now called the IMSA series. When I crashed and got crushed out and broke my back in 2001 at Indy, which was my second broken back, I knew I wasn't going to go back. I never said to retirement to anybody. I just was laying down at Methodist Hospital with 3 broken vertebrae, which was the second time I'd been down there. First time was in Brazil, got shipped home and with 3 broken vertebrae. So the second time doing that. And, when you're that time 40, just looking at it going, you know what, I think I'm done. So I really made the commitment. It took me 4 months to recuperate after that when I got out of Methodist. And the Indianapolis Motor Speedway television group and ABC and ESPN were talking about having me come and be an analyst. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just sort of, at that point in time, we were just sort of going to hang out. And the kids were growing up and we were spending a lot of time at the cottage. And I honestly just didn't think that I was going to really do a whole lot. It took me until Thanksgiving of 2001 to commit that I would actually do television, because they said to me, we really need to make a decision. They had talked to me back in, I think it was like August or something. And so I said, funnily enough, I said, okay, I will come and do it. Not sure anything about it, but I'll give it a shot. Have no idea. I'll come and do it for 1 year. Because, I had other stuff going on in the city too. So, and as it was, I ended up staying 17, if you can believe it. So, that was sort of ironic, but that's how it sort of happened. And, Paul Page was a play-by-play at that point in time. Bob Jenkins was the host. Both guys live around here, and became great friends. I was a rookie, so they told me that I had to go and pick them up every morning to take them to the airport, had to have coffee ready for them and all that sort of stuff. So I go up here by a mile and a half and pick up Bob Jenkins, go down here and pick up Paul, and then we drive to the airport. So I went through, it took me about a year of understanding that, my rookie stripes really weren't rookie stripes. They were just giving me a hard time. So, I love Bob. We had such a great time traveling, and I gained 10 pounds that summer just because those guys know all the great places to eat, and had a great time, and we got to work together for quite a few years. So it was a lot of fun, but that's how we ended up in television. And, just being, invited by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Television Network and ABC and ESPN, and just got into it and continued with it. And at that point in time, after ABC had finished, and then NBC came in, Paul Tracy has been there for the last couple of years, another Canadian, and then now James Hinchcliffe is coming in, who's another Canadian. So it seems to be like there's been a Canadian in the booth for the last 20 or 20 plus years, I guess. So it's sort of cool. And Hinch is going to do a great job.
Yeah, we talked to him actually, and he will do a great job. And Paul did a great job. Yeah. Paul is Paul, but of course I don't know him. But man, what a great racer! And he would just say it how he thought it. Which was refreshing, really.
Yeah. No, I've known the family for a long time because being Toronto, and I'm a little bit older than Paul, and Paul came through my school when I had my school after my first 3 years of Formula Ford. I opened a school in 83 and 84, as I mentioned, and Paul came through my school, and the talent and the ability was just, he got in the car the very first day and he wore the car. Like they say, it's like, you got to be all in one with your skis going down a hill, or you got to be all in one with a car. It was very evident that he had just immense natural talent. So it was very cool to see. Yeah. So known the family for a long time. And also, just on another side note of that, in 1984, when I went up to Trois-Rivières to get invited to drive that F2000 car, I still need some help and some assistance on putting some of the money together because I still owed so much money. So I said to the team owner that owned that car, Colin Hine, I said, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if I can get money for this or for that. Well, the word got around that I was going to go there. And the guy that paid my tire bill at Trois-Rivières that weekend was Tony Tracy, Paul's father.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What was the hardest thing going from driving full time to doing the TV full time? I mean, I know how hard it is just to do a podcast. So, TV, obviously you're live, you're on camera in front of millions of people on TV. I mean, that's got to be kind of overwhelming at first, right?
I'm not sure that I sort of ever felt that because I had so much help from Paul, and Paul was terrific because obviously I'd never had any background or schooling in that. You're talking to a guy that took I was so shy talking to a guy that actually took public speaking in Ryerson College in Toronto when I was there. It was just like, and I remember the very first class, they had everybody come up to the podium lectern and say who they were and why they were there. And I was just like, oh shit, I gotta go out there already. It was just like, it wanted nothing to do with it. Right. And so lo and behold, how things evolve and change, especially when you're getting involved in motor racing and having to do all the sponsor stuff. But the sponsor side of that with McKinsey Financial Corporation, the sponsor that I had, and Mr. Jim O'Donnell, who's the founder and president of McKinsey, took me on his road shows that he did for the mutual funds across Canada. And he would invite me up to the podium and we'd start talking about motor racing. And he did this purposely. It was really amazing. And then he'd get up there and we'd be talking about it because you always introduce the race car driver for our car. Big applause. You go up there and he's asking the questions and I'm answering them. And then thank you. And then one time he turned around, we were going through that and he said, I'll just halfway through the questions, he says, I'm just going to let Scott talk about it. He stepped away from the podium, right? And I'm standing there by myself with like probably 500 people in front of me. And, it was like, oh, okay, well, where are you going? And then I just continued on. So that was sort of, and then we were out in Western Canada one time, and we we're just both about ready to be introduced and walk out. And he just said, oh, God, I got to go do something. I can't go. You go out. I'll be right there with you. Well, he never came out. I got introduced. I went out there and I just started talking, and he knew that I was struggling in front of a group, in front of a crowd. So, and he did that, and I didn't notice that until later in the year, but he helped me get over that inability to get out there and talk in front of people. So, yeah, ironically, television, I don't think ever really bothered me in the sense of standing in front of a camera, because standing in front of a group never did after that too. But Paul Page helped tremendously, because I really didn't know what was going on. I just said, Paul, never done this before. And we were at a test in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was chatting to him about it. He said, after test, we're driving home to the hotel, ready to come back for the next day. And he said, okay, well, you seem like you're going to do great, but let's just do this. We're coming back from break, and I'm going to count us back, and then we're just going to do it like we're on the air. So 5, 4, 3, 2. Hi, Paul Page here. We just had a great race there, and this is what we saw, and come on that. And he says, and I'm going to ask my analyst now, what did you do? And he just started doing that in the car. And then we'd meet for lunch, and we do the same thing. And so he got me comfortable with it. And from the very first race, that was him that helped that, because they didn't send me anywhere. I didn't have background from it. And, it took some work. I mean, guys like Hinch are so natural at it, with the stuff that he does. He is going to be absolutely great. And, he's a natural at doing it. I can't say that I was natural. It took some work to understand, just to be able to do the work behind the camera, if you will, but getting prep for it, incorrectly, I thought that it was going to be, oh, well, great. I've got all these racetracks, never really got to see the cities, maybe go at some nice places for dinner, know some good golf courses there. Yeah, this will be fun. I'll go off and do this for a year or so. Well, that ain't the case. You're getting there and you're up and down the pit lane and in the garages and what have you, which is where I'd rather be anyway. So, yeah, still haven't seen a lot of golf courses that I thought I'd see at different places on the circuit.
This is something I've mentioned a few times to people, not on the show, just in passing conversation, but as a former driver, is it just me, or at the speedway, does it seem like, especially on the front straightaway, on the back straightaway too, they run so much closer to the fence on the inside?
And I think that, for a lot of people ask why you're away from the wall. I guess obviously disturbance of air. And, for me, it was, and I was taught by Ari, because Ari was my teammate when I went there in 1990. We were supposed to both be driving jet engines. At the last minute in Domino's car, he got a Chevrolet. So he was with Doug Shearson up in Adrian, Michigan, which is where I was going to operate out of. And then once Chevrolet came along, they had to sign a contract that there was going to be no other engine manufacturer in the building, in the race shop, which is understandable. So in the end result, I ended up having a satellite team down here in Indianapolis. And I run by Dick Karen, who's a great guy, good friend, and did a great job. And but Ari was still my teammate, and weekends or trailers were side by each, if you will. So the neat thing about that was I got to learn from Ari, and I don't think there could have been a better teacher for going around an oval track than Ari, especially for a guy, like I said, for me, that had not had any oval experience. So, just about how to set the car up going into the turn, driving the car off center and going through the turn. For me, rolling into it, it just helped tremendously. And everybody has a different line there, but when you go and watch guys that were so good at it, like Mears and Leyendijk and what have you, I mean, that's the fun thing for me when I was doing television, just to sort of see the difference in people's lines. And then also when I was doing spotting, I spotted up there for Fernando Alonso for a couple of years. If I had stood up there on the outside of turn one and saw how cars go through and the speed and all that sort of stuff, I probably would have never went and drove. it was like, how close they get to. And I was just like, yeah, I'm glad that like I said, I've had a spotted early in my career. I probably would have never went there as a driver.
Yeah, it just seems like, especially on race day, it seems like guys, it didn't appear like maybe my memory is failing me, but it just seems like guys are so much willing to run against that inner fence on the front straightaway, to make passes or anything like that. Whereas it seems like in years past they really didn't do that. But I guess maybe you get runs today that you didn't get in the old cars too, maybe the way they
Oh,
draft or something.
yeah. And, and I didn't really answer that for you that last time, but, I think, when you look at it, I think the cars are so much more even now than they were before.
Yeah, that
When
makes
you
more
came
sense.
off the turn before, the horsepower that we had, and when the thing spooled up, you either knew when you're coming out of the turn that you did the entry to the turn, or basically the run from three to four to get down the front stretch. I mean, because your passing starts setting people up in three if you're going to pass them down in one, obviously. But now everybody, because of all the same cars, all the same engines, if you will. I know there's two different manufacturers, but it's pretty much close racing, standard racing, if you will, compared to maybe what we had. We had maybe two or three people around us versus the packs that we have now of, five or six or what have you. And, maybe they're just flat braver because I don't know.
No, I don't agree with that.
It's just like, wow, I've hit the wall there a couple of times at Indy, and pre safer barrier or softer wall. I call it the safer barrier because there's no wall that's soft, but
Right.
Right.
it's yeah. I mean, we've seen some stuff over the years, haven't we? I remember even doing television, some stuff that would just make you shake. And yeah, I don't know. It's and I think there's a little bit more tolerance today too for moving over and protecting your line. I think back in our era, we didn't have spotters. Like when you ran at places like Michigan, and it didn't, all the big places like that, pre-spotters. I mean, you didn't have anybody talking to your ear. You had these little mirrors that you had right here, and you better make sure that you're not cutting somebody off, because if you do, you're going to have one of these veterans that their name is known worldwide coming down there and probably grabbing you by the throat. So it wasn't something you were going to go off and do. And plus, you're risking yourself and the other people and cars and drivers and what have you. I think that there's a lot more respect back then than there is now. Now I think you're driving it, and I drove obviously in the IRL with spotters. Took me a while to get used to it, but I think now that you are probably a little bit more gutsy, if you will, and clear, okay, then you make the big move and you move. I mean, back in those days, I mean, the speeds that we used to do at Michigan, I remember going out there on Saturday morning when it was cool and crisp, because it was always a standard 8:30 practice on Saturday morning. And if it was cool and crisp in the morning, those turbos, like the horsepower, man, you were going out there, and as bumpy as that place was, 2 miles around, you were averaging 236, 238, in the morning practice with the horsepower. Those things just love the cold air or cooler air. And you wouldn't even do 30 minutes of practice. You would just go after 15, 18 minutes, you're going, car feels good, I'm coming in, because it was rocket ship fast, but you had so much respect for what was going on then. Not that they don't have it today, but I think that they just feel a little bit more confident because maybe they do know that they're completely clear. So they make a move and take the air away from somebody. So I say that, but we had some just ridiculous races at Texas Motor Speedway when we started, and you had to have a spotter, because you were 2x2x2 for 10 rows, 11 rows.
Right.
And the first year we did Texas, I remember they, when I was with Panther, and they were saying, okay, pitting in 10. Great. Okay. Because as fast as laps go around there. Pitting in 5, pitting in 4, pitting in 3. And it was 3. I'm looking at, okay, on 4th, I'm on the outside. How can I get over there? It's just like, I had a problem, because you're not thinking about it because you never did it before. So then the guys on the inside started to peel off, and I was able to get on the inside. So, that was, okay, next time I'm going to find myself on the inside when I get close to a fuel stop instead of being on the outside, so you didn't have to take your foot off and try and find a place to get over. So I guess, so you needed spotters because we ran so close at places like, Texas or Charlotte when we did it. And gosh, we went to Dover, Delaware. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
Dover, Delaware one time. Yeah, that place was a handful.
Yeah, yeah. I watched it live, but I've watched replays of it a couple of times, and that was a rough day. The place was a little difficult.
Yeah, and Richmond. I didn't race at Richmond, but we did the test at Richmond in 2000 with the Pennzoil car, and then when I went back there, the next time I went back there, it was for television. But Richmond, I thought they had such a big bump on the front of the stretch that we couldn't get going any faster because the car was pounding the ground. And Dover was interesting because it was so rough when we went and tested there. We went back. They went back. Actually, I stayed over the next day with Leo Mel, who was running the IRL at that point in time, and we went out there with the spray can at the request of the track and marked all the places on the racetrack where I could remember I was hitting. You could see it because it was shiny anyways. And then they came and ground the whole racetrack because we were going to come and race there. And I remember they went back there for the next NASCAR Cup race. And Jeff Gordon commented, he goes, "Man, these IndyCar guys need to go everywhere we race because now they've come in and ground the track for these guys. This place is so smooth. It's like it's a luxury to drive now." So it was pretty hilarious. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So you're talking about spotting. I don't think I realized you did spotting until I saw your bio that you sent to us a couple of days ago. So was the only time you spotted, was that for Fernando? That was the only time you've done spotting in?
Yeah, it was. Obviously met him in 17 when we were doing television when he first came to run, and then got to do it the year that he didn't qualify. I'm going to say he didn't qualify. The car didn't qualify. And then the last time he was there. So I did twice for him for McLaren, and once in turn 1 and once at turn 3. And the second time was when we had no fans. And I got to tell you, that was the most weirdest thing I've ever done in my life.
I felt like a practice day or something.
Oh gosh, it really did. And it was sort of cool in the sense that, you're driving the track in the morning, there's no traffic. And, even when you're spotting, you need to get a police escort going in like I did before. But, on that day, hell, they didn't even need us at the racetrack because didn't the race start later that year? Maybe still start at 1, I can't remember. But they told us we didn't need to be there till 10 a.m. McLaren did, and I went, 10? My God, you'd feel like you were late to the prom at that point in time. No, but that was the weirdest thing. Yeah. And just the start of the race and them all coming down there and no emotion, no warmth, no color in the stands, standing up top there in turn 3 and calling the race. And yeah, it was a weird deal. But I'll tell you what, even when his car wasn't working, covered him in 17, met him in 17, but I will tell you that, most respectful guy when the car's not working, and sitting in there, because I'd sit in there with the engineering meetings, and just his recall on stuff, his thoughtfulness on stuff. And he was talking about doing some work they did on the simulator. And he started to recount, you remember we were doing this run on this simulator, and you guys talked about doing this, and the engineers were looking at him and they couldn't remember. He had to go like this. The guy's recall and memory is remarkable. It's just, and he is so tuned into racing cars. And the other side of it too was to see him, even after the car was terrible and he wasn't going fast, and even when he looked like he maybe wouldn't make and ended up not making that particular year, he'd still come out of the garage and stand out there and sign autographs for 30 minutes. Remarkable. I mean, as much as you hear different stuff about him, but he is dead serious about what he does. He is committed about what he does. That was the cool thing for me to see, to get to know him a little bit more, to see that side of him. It was pretty neat.
And to see what he did on his rookie year, I mean, obviously there was still a lot left in the race, but I mean, he was leading, and then his I don't know, was he leading when he had the engine failure?
No.
He was moving up though.
5th or 7th, I think, at that point. And just after
he said he'd been saving the right front. He was just trying to save the right front for the end of the race, is what he said.
Yeah. So he definitely had the ability and the car to do it. But, you know, as we all know, that whoever's leading at the last 20 doesn't sometimes win the last 20, 10, last 5. So,
Right.
you know, that's and the race changes too. And I've said this to a lot of people that, you know, people will allow you to make a pass or to not take your air off you or what have you with 20 laps to go, with 15 laps to go. In 10, the world changes and no one's polite anymore. You know, the luxuries that you had about maybe, you know, going up there and presenting yourself, that's not an option anymore. So the last 10 laps, completely different.
Sure. Well,
Well,
you have anything else, Scott?
I don't. I mean, we could talk for hours, obviously, and I'm sure you've got things you got to do. But, you know, first of all, I want to say thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you just one thing I did want to say, or one observation, I wanted to get your observation of. You've now been in this sport, literally every side of it.
Mhm.
You've owned. I'm sure you were in some capacity an owner for your son.
Mhm.
You've raced, you've ran the school, you're a director now, you've been at TV and that. I mean, really, when you were a kid, I guess it was talking about the dream. I mean, to be able to live your entire life in motorsports, did you ever think that that could have ever been possible?
Never. And, you know, as we talked about, just driving go-karts, it was more for the fun of it.
Sure.
And you got to meet friends. And, you know, I saw that with my son out here at Newcastle Motorsport Park, Mark Dismore's track, that, you know, he still has friends today and so far removed from karting that he met in karting. And, you know, and I think that's the key thing, is that you're out there enjoying it and you're having friendships and you're having a good time without knowing, you know, at that point in time, you're not even sure what you're going to take in school. You know, you're not even sure what you're going to try and take in university, of which I never got completely through, by the way, because I left to go motor racing in Europe. But, you know, and I think, you know, I don't think that you ever really know. You just hope to be able to go and enjoy racing and pay your bills. And never did I think when I was in grade school, middle school, high school, or at Ryerson, that I'd make a living at it. You know, you just trying to figure out a plan to get to tomorrow, to get to the next race, if you will. Um, you know, and I think that was probably because you would get noticed if you could drive a race car. And I think if you had the ability back then, if you had the tenacity just to keep at it, and, you know, for me, I didn't know anything else to do. I just wanted to go and race cars. You know, smarter people probably would have said, this isn't working and you're so much in debt, and went off and done something else. But I wasn't that smart, so I guess. So, you know, and that's what I really wanted to convey to my son. You know, we had so many conversations that, you know, I explained to him all the ins and outs, that you miss friends, programs, you don't have a life, you're not around on weekends. You know, missed a lot of stuff in our family. And, you know, I just, you know, shared all that with him. I mean, I shared so much of that with him. He said to me one time, Dad, it almost sounds like you don't want me to go racing cars. And I said, no, Michael, I want you just to understand really what the business is like today. Is completely changed, you know, as we spoke about before. So, you know, and I'm not sure that, you know, kids today, it is difficult. I mean, 75% of our F4 field every year is rookies coming out of karts. You know, we've got a program with the Radford School out in, which used to be the old Bob Bondurant School out in Phoenix, where, you know, you can go out there and get your F4 license. They have 10 F4 cars out there. So we're training young drivers to come. But, you know, there's so many hopeful drivers and parents, male, female drivers and parents, that, you know, we're just here to help, guide, answer questions, and chaperone. And we hope that, you know, they all make it. Now, they all might not go down to 16th in Georgetown when there's only 33 seats there every year at the Indy 500. But, you know, a lot of these guys will graduate and end up driving endurance cars, or, you know, something of that nature, or go off and do something else. And, you know, maybe they end up running a race team. I mean, there's so much enthusiasm for motor racing Not everybody will have the ability to be able to drive and make a living doing it. And a lot of it sometimes is not an ability. They could have the ability, but they also don't have the funding behind them. Because as we talked about earlier, it's not just the ability today, because the phone doesn't ring to ask you to come and do a test. It's the ability to be able to, two abilities, the ability to drive the car, the ability to pay the bill, so
Right.
it's difficult. Never did I think that I would ever do that, and I always had a plan that I was going to try it. And if I didn't get it done by 30, I was going to stop. Luckily, I was starting to make a bit of a living before I got to being the age of 30. And then I always said I was going to stop at 40 from racing and then go off and do other stuff. And I was retiring at 40 with the Pennzoil team. And I went back to go and do the program with Eddie with Infinity, which was when we ended up getting crashed out of Indy. So yeah, I'm not sure that you can set a plan. You just try as hard as you can, and hopefully you're doing something that you love. And that's like my son. He loves flying airplanes. So, he had two loves, flying airplanes and driving cars. I think airplanes was probably more than the cars. So you got to do what you love, isn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah. Somebody else mentioned on here before, and I don't remember who it was, but basically their thing was just be prepared to be able to take your opportunities when they come, if they come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really all you can do, right? I mean, it's at the end of the days, you do everything you can to be prepared for that moment if it arrives or when it arrives.
And you have to, and it's funny because now in my position, I'm talking to all the F4 kids and saying to them, we've got a program now that Pit Fit with the group over there that takes care of all the IndyCar drivers, with Gene Leo and Alex. They are the official training group for us for our F4 and F3 of our guys. And I explain to the kids and the families that come in, because I hold parent meetings with our young drivers all the time, because the parents need to be educated on what's going on with this as much as obviously the drivers do. And I tell them they need to get fit, not for driving the F4 car this year, but for driving the F3 FR car the following year or wherever they go. So you're working today for next year, a year out, 12 months from now. And I think that's hard for them to understand. And I got those guys on board because when I first started doing this my first year, standing up in race control, looking at all the monitors, these kids are used to driving go-karts for 10 laps, 12 laps, something that weighs 300 pounds. And now they're sitting in a car for 30 minutes nonstop, driving something around that weighs 1,500 pounds with no power steering. And I'm standing in race control looking at the monitors and I'm watching, after 12, 15 minutes, and I'm starting to see wheels drop off, mistakes being made. And it's because they're worn out. They're flat worn out. They're not fit enough to be able to drive a race car. And, they get a little bit tired, then they make mental mistakes, which causes wheels dropping off. And if they just do that and recover, get back on the track, that's one thing. But a lot of times they'll go off and come back on, they come on sideways and end up having a collision. So that's why I got Jim Leo's group Pit Fit to come along. And, but, that and talking about opportunities, and I explained to these guys that, when they get the opportunity, as you say, they might only get one. When I got called to go to Hockenheim to test for the Audi car, it's like, if you didn't have a good day, you're not getting called back 2 weeks from now to go try again. It doesn't work like that. And I explain to them all the time, be prepared, know everything about the race car, work with the engineers, work with the team managers. Don't just leave after the last session during the day, hang around and see what the mechanics are doing. Ask them about what's going on in the race car. Why are they doing the things that they do? And I think it was Carol Shelby's book that I read when I was coming up, to tune a race car, if I can recall. It's still somewhere in our house because I had my son do it. The thing's got to be 30 years old, but at least it makes your brain understand what a race car is doing, so you can understand and relate that and articulate it to the engineer. I mean, there's so much to racing to be successful than just driving a race car. Hence why, a lot of the IndyCar drivers end up moving to Indianapolis, so they can be in the shop during the week. And I explained to the kids that, that's why I'm in Indy. I wasn't here, when I started racing. I was in Toronto, I had a house in Toronto, a house in Florida. And then, in 1994, I found after the first couple of years, I was coming back here a lot. We had an apartment here, but, I just need to eat, breathe, and sleep it. I need to be with the engineers. If you're going to be successful, that's what you need to be doing. So, the opportunities, and you just hope that they come and take advantage of them. And I tell the drivers now, I mean, we're starting to take some of our young drivers to the IndyCar events. We're going to start taking some of them through the F1 event through an invitation with Haas, which is nice for an American team. And that's our FIA relationship, if you will, because we're an FIA series. So that really works out well. And but I tell the kids all the time, I mean, if you want to really make it in this business, get in your car or go however you have to do and just go to an IMSA race. Walk around and watch and learn. If you can see a manager or something like that, go and introduce yourself and just tell them who you are, and send them a thank you note afterwards. And you never know that maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, you might be ready to go and talk to some of these people. At least you put a face with a name. It's opportunities and commitment. Yeah.
I honestly think that's the best advice you could ever give. It's about relationships at the end of the day, and I realize budget's a part of it. But if you got if you got 3 people standing there with budget, and and they all got equal talent, let's say, in this hypothetical world, they all have equal talent, you're going to go with the guy you've made a connection with. Yeah. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Or girl. And I always say guy, and I hate that. I hate that I do that, because I should say, driver. There's so many women today racing that, it's not fair to them. But
yeah, no, we have, and we've got a diversity program within the Speed Tour group that we have that runs all our races. And Speed Tour, Tony Perella owns SVRA Vintage Series, the Trans Am Series, F4 Series, the F3 FR Series, and so we have a diversity program. I mean, because it's important. So we have a lot of females running our series, and Ernie Francis Jr. was in our series last year and won quite a few races in the FR car. And now he's sitting in an Indy Lights car for basically a Penske program. So he's got a lot of opportunity for him. And what a great guy, and 7 Trans Am championships. And I think did he win our SRX race last year? I think he did, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did.
And then, and that was a weekend, I really saw it as he developed, because he had not been in a single seater car before. And he was racing Trans Am at Mid-Ohio with us. He was racing his FR car at Mid-Ohio with us. And then he was leaving to go and run the SRX car. And so he's doing 3 things in one weekend. When we were running at Brainerd, Minnesota, he was zipping back and forth to run the SX car in Nashville, I think it was, at that particular weekend. So he'd be gone for a day, go and take care of that, and then came back real late Saturday night and or Sunday morning, and was ready to go and on Sunday. So yeah, pretty cool. It's just to see how many people are supporting diversity right now, and it's certainly changed from the days we heard where females weren't allowed in the pit lane and or in the garages or what have you. So, and it needed to. Yeah, it needed to.
Absolutely did. One of these days, there's so many young females racing. I mean, we're already starting to see it. We're seeing it a little bit in sprint car midget racing, where Kaylee Bryson is really good. And then like Haley Deegan's of the world, and she's got a lot of notoriety. She's great on the short tracks. She's got to get better on the bigger tracks, but she's brilliant at marketing. And drag racing, of course, drag racing has been an equal opportunity sport for a very long time.
Right.
So it'll change. There'll be a lot more as the years go on, and they race at these higher levels, and it'll come.
And you just said something about how our sport has changed. She is so good at social media, is what you just said. So when you think about that, to my era, it didn't exist. It didn't matter. Right. As long as you weren't getting yourself arrested, you were.
Right.
And I think now we've seen that, and it's growing so much to all the young kids. I think IndyCar, NASCAR have seen that in the last couple of years, because we fought with it with television viewership and what have you in the time that I was at ABC and ESPN. And I think now social media is starting to help bring that out. And I think, I just watched Daytona on the weekend. They're showing the crowd. There's a lot of young people there now. I don't think that was there 5 years ago. So, yeah, very enthused about the future of racing in the sport. And I know everybody's talking about the gasoline engine is dead and bring on electric and all that sort of stuff. I'm not down that road, but and I think what IndyCar has done, I'm still in all the mailing stuff and everything that from a media perspective, they are a well-oiled machine now, with the leadership that they had over there with Roger Penske and Mark Miles and Jay Fry. I think that, they've got their eyes set on the younger group and social media and, their events, and they should be. I mean, they're not just races, but they're events. And I know people used to always say, gosh, well, half the people at Long Beach don't even know who won the race when they leave. Probably true. Might be the same way if you go to the Kentucky Derby, when they leave, right. They might not know.
Or the Snake Pit.
Yeah. And I've been to the Kentucky Derby, and, I'm obviously getting a nice place to go and watch the horse race and all that sort of stuff. But, there's a whole contingent that aren't there, but it's part of the event. You want to be there. That's the way the Toronto race was in Canada. Before things started to slow down, there's a separation between the two, and then they didn't have a race for a year and everything of that nature. But that's more what we need to do today. And they're becoming events, even with what we're doing now with our F4 classification, FR, and the Trans Am Speed Tour. We've got probably 300-400 SVRA cars, 75 Trans Am cars, all our cars, which is total about 60. But there's also a car show that goes on that the Speed Tour management runs, and we can have generally 200 to 400, sometimes over 500 cars come in for our car show, and they pay admission and they get a chance to go drive around the racetrack at lunchtime. And what you're doing is you're creating more fans. They're only going around at 15 or 20 miles an hour. Because it gets now so big that we have to open multiple gates to let cars out. They can't all funnel out through one gate, obviously. But, it's a business. It's absolutely a business. And just to create younger fans, there's no doubt about it. We've missed a generation. I'm sure everybody's said about that. I'm not a marketing expert, but I've heard people say that. But I think people are getting younger, and hopefully they can remain car fans and race fans and road car fans. Don't want to see all our dealerships full of electric cars. Not quite yet.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've had that. I've had a great fear about that myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Scott, thank you so much. It is an honor and a pleasure. Hopefully we can have you back toward the winter when your schedule lines up. And there's a lot of things I would love to talk with, pick your brain about and that sort of thing. So please know that you're invited back anytime you want to come back.
Well, I appreciate it. And, as I mentioned, glad you guys are doing this, because talking about reaching out and connecting with people, it's exactly what you guys are doing. So, maybe give that guy that's in the picture behind me, Mr. Unser, a ring, get him on. He's got a lot of great information for all the great stuff that he's doing today within our series, because he's a driver coach and development for Future Star Racing, which is where Ernie Francis Jr. was last year. So, and a lot of up and coming drivers. So neat to have him at the racetrack with our series each and every weekend. And, I keep telling him the cars are side by side when we went across the line. I got to be good for some of that prize money you got, right? It should be something. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott.